Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Dark and Creepy. All stories are written and narrated by me, MC Allen. I'm a park ranger for a national park in the US, and this story I'm going to tell you has been hidden for years by my superiors, but now I shall finally bring it to the light. When I first got this job, they were very straightforward with answering all of my questions, until we were driving along one of the dirt roads. Off in the distance, I spot a barbed wire fence surrounding an area of land on the side of a mountain. "What's that fence for?" I asked while observing it from afar. The park ranger that was showing me around looked to where I was pointing, and I could sense fear by the ways his eyes slightly grew wider. He focused back on the road and said, "That's nothing. Just a place to protect the wildlife and plants that live there. From getting trampled on by hikers." His response made sense to me, because I've heard of other areas being blocked off to protect the plants and such, but his body language was holding something from me. However, I didn't want to be that annoying new guy, so I just replied with, "Okay, makes sense to me." The man tightened his grip on the steering wheel as he stated, "Yeah, just make sure to keep people and yourself far away from that area entirely. To protect the plants." Feeling a sort of awkward silence between us, I replied saying, "Will do, but if I may ask, what plant species are they trying to protect in that fence?" The man's face scrunched up as he thought about how to respond. He then just said to me, "You'll find out later what's back there, but you haven't been here long enough for us to trust you, and to trust that you won't tell anyone about it, so just hold your horses." After hearing this, I slumped in my seat and listened to the rest of the tour of the area. When we got back to the ranger station, everyone was welcoming me and introducing themselves, and one man in particular stood out to me. He had sort of a Santa Claus physique, with an especially white beard that had only small remnants of a gray color to it. When I shook his firm hand, he told me his name was Paul Geyer, but he goes by Ranger Paul. He was the main one in charge of foreseeing this particular national park, so he took me into his office to give me all of the gear that I would need along with the schedule. "What made you want to be a park ranger, kiddo?" he asked as he signed some documents that lay on the top of his desk. Taking a second to think about how to respond, I then said, "I enjoy the outdoors and thought it would be both fun and interesting to be a park ranger." He looked up from signing the documents and said, "Are you easily scared?" This question caught me off guard, and I wondered why he was asking me that. Anyway, I knew I had to respond, so I said, "I'm not really scared of that much. Maybe bears?" Ranger Paul scoffed after hearing this, saying, "Bears? Bears are the least bit of your worries here. We lose far more people who've gotten lost in the woods than people who've been mauled by bears." He pauses and looks out the window as he continues, "It's the woods you have to worry about." "About how many people go missing here a year?" I asked, trying to avoid an awkward silence. "Too many is all I can say. If it wasn't for that darn..." Paul stopped mid-sentence and turned to me. "You'll see," he muttered as the park ranger who was showing me around previously walked into the room and pulled me out, taking me to sign all of the required paperwork. As I was signing, I could barely hear him talking to Ranger Paul, saying something along the lines of, "You nearly told him what's out there before he even signed the non-disclosure agreement." The rest of their conversation got muffled after the door closed completely. I was honestly intrigued to figure out what they were hiding beyond that fence. After that, I took every chance I could get to find out as much as I could about it, but no one budged on what they originally told me, until I had worked there for about 3 months. That's when Ranger Paul decided I should know what was behind the fence. He pulled me into his office on a stormy day when we weren't checking if people had paid for camping tickets and said, "I know you've been interested to figure out what was behind that fence, and you will, but promise me that you will never tell another soul about it." I promised, and he continued, "You're not going to like what I'm going to tell you, because it's quite anticlimactic. The reason we have that fence to keep people out is that there is a stream of water up there that just pops out of the ground from some source within the mountain itself and flows for about 20 feet before it again disappears back into the mountain." I interrupted, saying, "That's really not that unusual. I mean, it could just be a spring popping out from the ground." Paul raised his hand up to quiet me as he continued, saying, "You are right. But that's not what's unusual about this. The water. It flows upstream. It goes against gravity and all other forces of nature as it flows upward on the mountain for about 20 feet. Perplexed and intrigued at the same time, I said, "Really? If it does, why put a fence around such a scientific marvel? People would come across the world to see that." Ranger Paul smiled as he said, "That's what they first insisted on doing, but that place ain't right. It's cursed or something." I asked him what he meant, and he responded by saying, "Most of the people who discovered it went missing and were never found. Those were the lucky ones. For the ones that didn't go missing, they somehow were morphed into deformed humanoids without the capability to speak. One, however, could slightly speak, and all he said was, 'Hell's Entry.'" After he said this, I knew he had to have been playing a prank on me to haze me or something, but his expression never changed as he said, "That water, going against gravity, is some sort of an enigma. The place is like a portal to other worlds or dimensions, crap like that. The government tried to study it, but after losing half of their scientists who were researching it, they gave up on it, leaving it locked up behind a fence." A few days soon passed by after this, and I couldn't deal with the explanation that Paul gave to me. It just didn't make sense. And so one night, I snuck out and decided to hike over to the fenced area. I took a pair of wire cutters to cut through the fence, because I didn't want to try to climb over the barbed wire that was wrapped around the top of it. When I finished cutting out a small hole I would be able to fit in, I brightened my flashlight as I heard the trickling of water. Following the sound, I soon stumbled upon the stream and all of its beauty. When I shined my flashlight at the water, it was almost as transparent as glass. Ranger Paul wasn't making the whole thing up when he said the water went back against gravity. To my utter amazement, I reached my hand down into the stream and felt the push of the water towards the top of the mountain. I was elated due to how beautiful it was, and wondering why anyone would ever want to hide something like this. As I was touching the water, I heard something splash, and glancing over, I saw a man, crouched over on all fours, with his back to me. Startled by the man's presence, and wondering if he was lost, I got back on my feet and walked toward him. "Are you lost, sir?" I asked as I placed my hand on his shoulder. His head turned around to meet my gaze, and my heart stopped. All he had on his pale, blank face was a mouthful of sharp-edged teeth. Stumbling backward, I fell into the stream, which felt strange as it tried to push me up the mountain, until I pulled myself out. The thing didn't move at all, but just sat there, mumbling fragmented sentences. Freaked out, I darted to where I came, and the thing somehow sensed my sudden movements, and inhumanly crawled after me. It climbed into a nearby tree, and tried to pounce on me. All the while I could hear it say in an uneven tone, "Save me. No. Gates." With my mind spinning, I noticed that the ground underneath me was shifting, and gravity was coming in and out. The world around me seemed to change back and forth, but I kept in the same direction and saw the fence ahead of me where I cut the hole out of. It kept changing from a fiery cave wall back to the fence until I quickly made it there. But it was a cave wall by then. There was no way for me to escape now until it swiftly changed back for a fragment of a second. Taking the opportunity, I jumped through the hole in the fence, and the thing tried to follow after me, but it didn't make it through. Its screams still keep me awake at night. After this, Ranger Paul later found out about it, but didn't fire me on the spot. Instead, he said, "After being in there, you're the last person on Earth who'd ever want to go back in, so I'm not going to fire you." He instead gave me all of the crappy jobs for 2 months afterward. That happened around 4 years ago, but still, I'm not supposed to be posting this story here due to the non-disclosure agreement I signed. I guess I just broke that agreement because I need to warn everyone that if you find a random area in the woods fenced off, whatever you do, don't try to break into it. You just might never make it back.